It's Cassidy. I am from Vancouver, Washington. I'm 12, and I wanted to tell you about my story in Vernonia. So my grandma, she owns a farm, and it was my birthday, so we decided we were going to camp. So we set up camp and instantly went to sleep, but I couldn't sleep for some reason. I had this urge to go outside, and so I went outside, and I heard these creaking noises, and I looked up at the trees to see this giant creature looking down at me with glowing yellowish reddish eyes, and it was huge. It was a good 45 yards, a tree with its long arms, and it was just really scary. And so that's my story, and thanks. I'm a really big fan, and congratulations on Sarah. Bye.
Good evening and welcome to Monsters Among Us. I am your guide, Derek Hayes. And thank you, Cassidy, and thanks for the kind words. You know, that sounds like a thrilling experience. And mighty brave of you to venture outside based on a simple urge. Now, based on the description, I wonder if it wasn't perhaps a large owl that was witnessed. You know, the detail about its position in the tree and the glowing eyes of the creature really helped me to lean toward that logical explanation. But, given the general description, if I did have to pick a culprit here, why not bet on the bat squatch? The state of Washington is known for a number of cryptid creatures that have been reported within the state. And Washington is one of those states also well known for its sightings of the legendary Sasquatch. But Sasquatch isn't the only beast known to hang out in the state of Washington. It is some kind of humanoid creature that appears to be both primate and bat. The bat squatch. It's a cryptid that some have connected with the massive Mount St. Helens volcano eruption back in 1980. A tragedy that killed 57 people and destroyed over 200 properties, with miles of roads and railway damaged. Now, the connection with the tragedy comes about due to the unconfirmed claims of people alleging to witness some kind of creature in the area just after the eruption. Something with an ape-like body, glowing eyes, and bat-like wings. A creature said to give off feelings of dread. Now, the bat squatch, a 9-foot-tall humanoid beast or entity, has varying descriptions, including that it has bird-like feet, massive bat-like wings, with a wingspan possibly up to 50 feet. It's also described as having blue fur, yellow or red glowing eyes, and some describe it looking more wolf-like rather than primate. Now, that info on the bat squatch, courtesy of theweeklyrambler.com. Now, bat squatch, at least to me, is one of those cryptids I jokingly consider. The name is just too silly to take seriously. But the Weekly Rambler made me think of something. This isn't even close to the first flying humanoid that's been reported on the show. You know, Point Pleasant, West Virginia immediately comes to mind. That led me to ask myself the following question. Would we be taking Mothman as seriously as many researchers seem to do if it was dubbed something like Moth Squatch instead? I have a hunch that the answer's no. And as many argue, Mothman is a supposed harbinger of doom, a precursor to tragic events to take place in the area of the sighting, and for folks to see a strange flying humanoid in and around Mount St. Helens around the time of the blast. That checks out. Either way, thank you so much, Cassidy, for your entry and for your bravery. Now I have an amazing program slated for you this evening, and you'd be hard-pressed to find another program with nearly as many eerie tales and spooky stories to share. And speaking of that long list of entries, our next tale of the evening comes to us from Anthony in the state of Maryland.
Hey Derek, this is Anthony from Westminster, Maryland. It's about 7 p.m. on a Tuesday evening. I was heading northbound on 97 from Westminster, Maryland, heading towards Littlestown, PA. And I was doing the thing that you always say is like, always be aware of your surroundings and be looking out for things to happen. And for the first time in a long time, I actually may or may not have seen something happening, but pretty sure there was no reports of comets or meteor showers in our area, so there should be no reason for it. But what I saw was an opening in the atmosphere open up, and then something dropped down, and it had a tail to it, like it was on fire, and then it hit the earth, like an impact. Like I saw, it looked like it landed, like it went straight down, and it was very fast. I don't know, it could have been a spaceship flying out of something or falling out of something. There has been a lot of aircrafts in the sky today, but yeah, I just thought I'd call in. Sorry, I'm pretty nervous. This is my first time. It's been a long time since I've witnessed something paranormal. So anyway, thanks for your platform, and I appreciate it. Bye.
Thank you, Anthony. You know, something about this entry reminded me of the infamous supposed UFO crash near the small hamlet of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. A place not all that far from the setting of Anthony's story. Now I know I've spoke of this widely circulated incident in the past, but for those in need of a refresher, the following clip was provided by WTAE, ABC News 4, out of the city of Pittsburgh.
It's been more than 40 years since this happened. People from as far away as Canada report they saw something falling from the sky that night. Those here in Kecksburg say it landed right here, and those who were able to get close to it say it looked just like that.
I seen the streak in the sky, I seen the orange streak in the sky.
A tribute to what some remember from December 9th, 1965.
And we looked down over the hillside because they wouldn't let us down in, and we could see the military walking around down in the woods.
The whole town still talks about it. You can buy souvenirs and hear the locals talk about it at the Kecksburg UFO store. The money raised goes to the local fire department. Firefighters were some of the first there that night, and some saw a flatbed truck haul the thing away. When reporters asked, the official military reply, "We were never there."
It did happen. It did come down in the backwoods of Kecksburg, and something was taken out. The military was here.
Now, over the years, I've heard all sorts of theories as to what crashed in Kecksburg that evening. Theories ranging from a UFO complete with alien occupants to a top-secret Nazi time travel experiment called Die Glocke, or the Nazi Bell. Now, regardless of what fell that evening, the dozens of witnesses that have spoke out over the years confirm that something did happen, and the military did intercept an object. Now, as what Anthony saw, Kecksburg Part 2, well, it's incredibly hard for me to say. But the initial description was too similar to Kecksburg not to make that connection. So thank you again, Anthony, for sharing your experience. Now, before we move forward, I need to briefly mention last week's secret entry. You may remember Colin's entry about a rodent of unusual size. Well, after the call, I tossed out a few contenders, but one didn't make the cut. I suppose for time reasons. Well, that was a mistake, apparently, because dozens of you have written in over the past week suggesting, and rightfully so, that the invasive rodent species, Nutria, is likely to blame for what Colin saw. Some folks even claim to know of other Nutria sightings in the state of Massachusetts. So, there you go. Probably more likely than a capybara, and probably the horse I should have ran with. And a big thanks to those listeners that wrote in Thank you for keeping me honest. Now next up, we venture to my state of California, where we find Kathleen with a wild tale to share.
Hi, Derek. My name is Kathleen, and I'm from Phoenix, Arizona. I'm actually a first-time caller, so hopefully I don't get too weird. But I'm calling about an experience that I had back in my hometown of Merced, California, back in 2013. Back then, I was a body piercer at one of the local tattoo shops, which was located in a house that was turned into a business. Previously, I think it had been a hair salon. The home had been built in 1951, and coincidentally, there was a morgue/funeral home located just behind our building. Right away, when I started working there, it was actually a brand new business, and things just started happening. Like, doors would creak open and close, always felt like you were being watched. I remember one time it felt like a hand touched me on my thigh, which was really weird. I just always had a sense that there was something there. It was just all around really creepy. And then something particularly strange started happening. As I mentioned before, I was a body piercer, and a lot of body piercers will have a dummy, like mannequin, where you have examples of different piercings that you can get, usually displaying jewelry, but I didn't have a mannequin, so I used a Furby that I had. And, I gave it like an eyebrow, ear, lip, cheek piercings, things like that. It was just honestly mostly a joke. But one day I walked into my station and my Furby looked really scary. And this is really comical, but it looked alarmed. It was almost as if someone had come up to it and raised its ears completely upward, opened its eyes and mouth like it were screaming. Inherently, Furbies are already really creepy, so I went to all my coworkers and I showed them. I was like, dude, this isn't cool. Stop messing with my Furby. And they all were very adamant that they hadn't touched it, and I believed them because, let's face it, that was super creepy. Weird things would continue to happen. I'd be sitting in my room doing inventory, and the door would close, or sounded like there were people walking around, and I would get up and everyone was sitting, tattooing, or not tattooing if we weren't busy. So the things the Furby kept happening, and one day I just got really fed up, and I said, outwardly to, the supposed ghost in the house, I said, you have to stop touching my things and stop frightening me. I understand if you lived here before, and I respect you, but you have to respect me. But if you're a creepy guy from the morgue, you are not welcome here. And I was really firm about it. And then that night when we went to lock up the building, like I said before, it was formerly a house. So the security system for the building was set up like a home. So it was just me and one other coworker. And all the lights are off. It's already really creepy in there. And I press to arm the building, and it says, "Caution, motion in the living room." And I looked at my coworker, and he goes, "No, dude, there's no one here." And I was just totally scared because the living room would be the lobby of the tattoo parlor. And then I press it again, arm, and it says, "Caution, motion in the living room." And so I looked at him. He had kind of been there when I had talked to this supposed ghost. And I kind of stepped out towards the darkness, and I said, "Hey, I'm really sorry if I offended you earlier. That wasn't my intention." And then I stepped back, and I pressed arm, and it said, "Caution, motion in the kitchen." And that would have been directly in front of me when I spoke outward towards the darkness. And my coworker and I were absolutely mortified. I quickly pressed armed again, and it said all clear, and we were able to leave. So I actually ended up shortly after that transferring to another tattoo shop because I was totally freaked out by that whole experience. I probably went back there only once. I definitely had a lot of paranormal experiences in my life, particularly with ghostly things. But that one was probably one of the only times I actually felt threatened. So, yeah, that's my story. I've got a lot of fun, spooky, ooky tales that I could probably call back with in the future. So Thank you so much, Derek. I think you're awesome, and I love what you do, so can't wait to maybe hear this on air. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathleen. Now, I don't know what it is about tattoo parlors, but I hear this sort of thing a lot. In fact, we've covered several stories on Paranormal Caught on Camera over the past few seasons of other tattoo establishments across the country harboring some sort of strange paranormal activity. So I wonder. I know receiving a tattoo can be an emotional experience for many. And given the sheer amount of art inked, some of that energy has to be hanging around, right? And if it is somehow still there, is it possible for it to somehow manifest into the strange occurrences that Kathleen just described? Or, as it seems Kathleen might have suggested, is this energy attracting spirits from the nearby morgue? Not only attracting them, but providing them with the power necessary to allow them to pull off these shenanigans. Now, all these are theories, of course. And Sarah and I have been kicking around the idea of getting some new tattoos, sort of celebrate our survival through the pandemic. So perhaps we will get to experience that energy ourselves, firsthand. Until then, thank you again, Kathleen, for the entry. Now, if you have a tale to tell, like Kathleen, call the hotline at 1-888-608-NIGHT. That's 1-888-608-6444. Or you can visit the website at monstersamonguspodcast.com and click on the Report Your Sightings tab for more submission options. Oh, and a quick reminder, the Hometown Legends finale is steadily approaching, so if you're sitting on a call, it's time to get it in. You know who we haven't heard from in quite a while? It's our old friend, the Glimmer Man. So please join me in welcoming Virgil from the state of Colorado to the program.
Hey, Derek. This is Virgil from Colorado. I listened to your first show of the season about the Glimmer Man and knew I needed to call and tell you my encounter. It took place when I lived in California as a kid. I'm in Colorado now, but this in a little town about 6 miles or so north of Bakersfield in the foothills. And it was about 66 or 67 when I was 8 or 9 years old. It was summer and got called in for dinner. Then after dinner, went back outside to play for a while the sun was still up. And then came in and cleaned up and went to bed. My mom had asked me before I went out after dinner to make sure that I had turned the front sprinkler off before I came in. And, of course, I forgot it. So she hollered at me and asked me if I'd shut it off. And, of course, I had to go out in my tighty-whities and shut it off. I turned on the front porch light, and the faucet was off to the right, like a 45-degree angle from the front door, maybe 30, 40 feet from the front porch. And I went out, it was, no big deal, walked over. We lived, the house was isolated enough, and I, like I said, just went out there and as I was and turned the water off. And as I turned around, at the southeast corner of the house was a human shape. No real details, just kind of sparkling, shimmering. I always compared it to like the Star Trek when they would beam down to a planet. That's the only way, that was the closest I could get to an explanation or be able to explain it to anybody. And I'm not sure if it was actually making its own light or just reflecting the porch light. I just stood there face to face, not knowing what I was looking at. I don't remember if it just disappeared or it stepped back around the corner of the house, but there was no way I could move. While it was there, it was closer to the front porch than I was, or the front door, by at least half. It didn't do anything. It didn't really move other than just, like I said, just kind of shimmer and catch the light in that human form. I've heard people say that they're just like eye floaters or something in your eye that causes this, but I was face to face with this thing, 40 feet at the most for a good 10 or 12 seconds. I've heard people say as well that no one ever saw anything like this before the Predator movies came out. But this was 21 years before, so that doesn't make sense either. I hadn't heard of Glimmer Man until recently, and, I didn't know what to make of it. I know I ran into bed. I didn't tell anybody. I just ran back into the house and crawled under the covers, and that was it. And I actually hadn't even thought about it for a long time until I started hearing people talk about Glimmer Man. But that's my story. I love your show. Keep on doing a good job. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You took the words right out of my mouth. I was about to explain that this sighting is significant because it took place years before the first Predator movie was even thought of, which to me suggests that whatever this is, it is not inspired by the Predator films. Now, of course, I have no clue what these entities are, but with each submission we get, we find ourselves one step closer to the truth. And I know that there's a lot of interest in this subject, so I linked to a few Glimmerman experiences in the show notes if you'd like to learn more. Well, thank you, Virgil, for sharing the encounter. By my memory, this is probably the oldest Glimmerman story I've ever heard. So thanks again for sharing it with us. Now, real quick before we move on, Sarah has been working non-stop on all the new merchandise, and I'm happy to say it's finally here and up in the shop. There are several new items, including an amazing kid-friendly Sasquatch t-shirt design by friend of the show, Greg Johnson. And fresh off the presses, or whatever they use to make these things, we have a brand new Monsters Among Us enamel pin, courtesy of Liz Pavlovic of Keep On Creepin' On. So jump on over to the website at monstersamonguspodcast.com/shop and grab your gear today. Oh, and I'm super excited to announce a brand new Patreon exclusive glow-in-the-dark t-shirt design featuring me in a phone booth with a few of my cryptid buddies. Now, to purchase this Patreon exclusive, you need to be a supporter. And to do that, simply pledge any level at patreon.com/Monsters Among Us Podcast and check out the most recent post and or listen to Monsters Among Us Beyond number 47 for further details. And a huge thanks to Jordan Hirschberger for the amazing design. So if you thought that last story was odd, wait until you hear the encounter from Jill. She has a Shadowman entity, unlike any we've ever heard before.
Hi, Derek. My name is Jill. I wanted to give you a call. I've been wanting to call for a while now, but I've been listening to the backlog of podcasts, and today I came across Season 4, Episode 5, where a caller talked about something he and his family called the Black Thing, basically a shadow person who was able to move physical objects. Since my experience is sort of in the same vein, listening to that call today inspired me to call. There was this thing, I called it my Shadowman, because it seemed to follow me even when we would move. The first time I saw it, I was 3. We were not very well off, so at the time I slept in the same bed with my parents because there was really only one bedroom in the home, and I would be in between them. We left the bathroom light on. I guess, maybe they did it for a nightlight for me. Maybe they did it so they could go in the middle of the night. I don't know. But the door would be only open a tiny, tiny crack. And I noticed one time, I was 3 years old, but since it repeated, I remember. And this shadow, it was almost two-dimensional looking. It squeezed out through the crack. It was very, very dark, darker than the surroundings, and it was definitely in the shape of a person. And as it came out of the bathroom, it always appeared two-dimensional. And then as it would step into the bedroom, it would slough out, I guess is the best word, into a normal 3D human shape. And this frightened me very much, but I can never remember mentioning it to my parents. Anyway, this would happen off and on. When I turned 5, we moved from that home into another home, and I got my own room. Yay! And I still continued to see this figure, and it would always come out of the bathroom in a two-dimensional sort of appearance and then fluff out when it got into a larger space. When I turned 6, we moved again, and I continued to see the figure. My new bedroom was in a position so that I could no longer see the bathroom. And so I don't know if it maintained the 2D to 3D transition that I had noted previously, but it continued to come into my room. However, the fear of it left me because it never harmed me. And it suddenly stopped feeling threatening when we moved into that home when I was 6. Also, the incidence of seeing it decreased. It came less often. Well, being a girl, I went through puberty and into the early teens, and I was in a very poor emotional state, a lot of tension, particularly with my mother, but also with my father. And here's where my shadow person experience begins to deviate from those I've heard before. The shadow person took on more of a comforting role, and I could actually physically feel it put its arm around my shoulders and be comforting and pat me on the back or stroke my hair in the night as I lay in bed before I would go to sleep. I noticed when I was particularly upset and if I was crying, it would come almost like I could call to it. And it would be very comforting to me, and I could physically feel it, like there was a hand stroking my hair. And it was nothing like sexual or weird. It was just a very comforting thing, and I didn't fear him. I called him my Shadowman because I hadn't heard of shadow people at this point in my life. So anyway, I continue to, when I'm having bouts of strong emotions, see this figure off and on into my early 20s. And this is through a course of moving away from my parents, and I was living with a boyfriend at the time. And I hadn't seen the Shadowman for quite a while. And I was starting to worry that he had left me. And I had an upsetting day. Boyfriend wasn't around. Shadowman came. And this time, it was very hands-off. I wanted the comfort that I had gotten from this entity in the past, but although I could see it, it didn't approach. It didn't come to me. And that was the very last time I ever saw him. Just to be clear, no facial features, no clothing could be identified. I know I've heard of some shadow people that come wearing hats, or that you could tell they're wearing an overcoat or something like that. In my experience, it was just kind of like the dude on the side of the men's restroom, except the head was attached. I have not seen him since then. I was, 23 or 4 the last time I saw him, and I'm 52 now. And I've had a lot of traumatic experiences since then. He's never come back. I don't know why he left, why he was there, why he stopped being scary to me, how he could touch me, or anything like that. But I've been wanting to share this story for a long time, and I really hope the gentleman from Season 4, Episode 5 is still listening to the podcast, because, like him, I had a shadow man who could actually affect things in the physical world. Love the podcast. Please continue, and I will continue to listen. Thank you, Derek.
Thank you, Jill. That's incredible. Now Jill took the imaginary friend to the next level and just manifested one. And the encounters that Jill had, well, they may have been sweet to her, but I've seen that horror movie before. The little girl that befriends the ghost, and it seldom ends well. But in all seriousness, the series of events is quite bizarre. And if I'm honest, unlike any other shadow person encounter I've ever heard before, the only thing I can think of, and this again is using one mystery to explain another, but the only thing I can think of is that perhaps this wasn't a shadow person in the traditional sense, but rather a ghost of some sort, the spirit of a deceased human that somehow managed to appear blackened and shadow-esque. But like I said, that's really all I can think of. Now regardless, I really enjoyed the entry, so thank you, Jill, for calling it in for us. Well, just like that, we've reached the end of the line, so to speak. And coming to us from north of the Arctic Circle, please welcome Sheena to the program.
Hi, my name is Sheena. I'm from Alaska. I'm from a small village in Alaska. It's called Arctic Village, and it's a small community of roughly 150 people. It's 90 miles north of the Arctic Circle and at the foot of the Brooks Range. Now, we are Netsagwitchin people, and we believe in Bigfoot, but in our language, we call them Na-in. Na-in translates to Bushman. Well, in April 2016, we have wood stoves to heat our homes. We have to chop a hole in the ice in the river to pack water for our homes. There's no plumbing. There's no electric heating. So my husband has to go out onto the land and chop trees down and bring them home so we can keep our houses heated. So it was springtime in Alaska. It still gets very dark very early. And he had gone out into the woodyard, his woodyard, which is about 15 to 20 miles outside of the village. Arctic Village is surrounded by mountains. We're at the base of the mountains. One of the nearest mountains is called Ditchanle. Now, his woodyard is at the base of Ditchanle. And he drove out there with our dog, Gwynzy. And it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so the sun was setting. And he stayed out there until about 5. And he said while he was out in his woodyard, he usually stays in his woodyard for 6 hours plus, just trimming trees, chopping them, and piling them so the next day he can go out and just get a load here, get a load there as needed. So it was fairly dark by the time he had finished limbing some trees, and he was getting ready to saw them down when our dog Gwynzy started acting strange. Now, Michael went out into the woodyard with a snow machine, and when Gwynzy gets scared, he tries to crawl up into the hood of the snow machine, and we know this about Gwynzy because when Michael goes out hunting, Michael's my husband, when Michael goes out hunting and he's shooting, Gwynzy will crawl up into the hood of the snow machine. So that's what Gwynzy started to do, and Michael thought that was odd. And then he heard a whistling. Now, this is springtime in Alaska in April. The birds are not there quite in Arctic Village yet. It's too far north. It's really cold. So he knew that there weren't any birds around that could be the source of this whistling noise. And it was like that. Our dog Gwynzy started whimpering, and he was trying to climb into the hood of the snow machine. He was climbing on the snow machine. And my husband was whistled at twice. It was pitch black. He couldn't see anything. Our hunting dog, Gwynzy, was acting really scared. And my husband did not want to find the source of the whistling. So he decided to leave his woodyard that night early and come home. He did not tell me the story until about 2 or 3 weeks later because he was so shook up about it and he didn't believe he heard what he had heard. In my culture, Na-in or Bushman usually whistle, especially at night. And one of the common things in my culture is we are not allowed to whistle at night or knock on anything at night. And in Arctic Village, we just walk into people's houses. We don't knock or anything because it's so frowned upon to do those things at night. So anytime anyone hears any whistling at night, we know it's Na-in that's, trying to communicate with us. Now, they only speak Wichin. They don't speak English. We do believe that they are out there, and we do believe that they do try to communicate with us sometimes. My husband's story is not the first story about being whistled at night up in the mountains or near the base of the mountains. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheena, for the long-distance entry. Now, I believe this is the first entry we've had from above the Arctic Circle. And I'm happy to hear that I can keep everyone company up there on those long winter nights or days or however all that works up there. So, a whistling Sasquatch. Now, this shouldn't be the first you're hearing about this creature's ability to communicate with a whistle. And we've discussed it before, as has nearly any other outlet that dares breathe the monster's name. And what I'm getting at here is that whistling is believed to be a form of communication these creatures could use if they do indeed exist. And I did some digging around and found a few examples for you to hear. Now, before I play these clips, be warned, they are recordings of whistles, so some speakers may not sound so great on these low-quality clips. So in other words, have your hand on the volume button. Here are the first few examples. Now those clips are courtesy of the Sierra Sounds and Lord Cryptid on YouTube, respectfully. And I know what you're thinking. Why would a human-like creature resort to whistling to communicate? Well, for starters, whistles travel great distances, much greater than any average human voice. And the communication, although public and out there for all to hear, does not sound like normal language. And someone eavesdropping may not even realize communication is taking place, let alone grasp the meaning of the actual dialogue. I imagine many would just dismiss them as natural sounds found in the environment. So, you still think this is a bit far-fetched? Well, what if I told you there was a precedent in place? Now, this is another one of those volume-ready moments.
Finally, practitioners of the world's most endangered language are appealing for financial assistance to save it from extinction. It's mainly used by an aging population in a mountain village on the Greek island of Evia, and the language is dying with them.
Then you encounter the unique voice of Kyriaki Yanakari, trilling as clear as a bird, chatting to her distant neighbors.
It's essential we preserve this language. We have to keep it. This is the way we've grown up.
Experts believe the language dates back to ancient Greek times.
Now that clip was courtesy of PBS NewsHour. So humans use this technique. Why wouldn't near-human species? If that is in fact what these things are. And with the knowledge of the Whistlers of Antino fresh in your head, please take a listen to another portion of the Sierra Sounds by Ron Moorhead and Al Berry.
Come on now. We'll be back. Come on down.
Now tell me you don't hear the resemblance. Can an ape even whistle? I hear a few of you distantly rumble. Well, I don't know about all that, but I can tell you that Bonnie can.
Isn't that something? An orangutan at the National Zoo has a very unique talent. She can whistle. Scientists say Bonnie's whistling has implications on the evolution of speech. They say orangutans can be trained to make human sounds. But what makes 32-year-old Bonnie's skill so special is that she was not trained. She learned it all on her own. She is special.
Now that clip courtesy of ABC Nightly News. And I'll be damned if Bonnie's lonesome tune doesn't sound oddly similar to the others we shared here tonight. Now, I can't say that Bigfoot does exist, let alone if it can whistle. But plenty of witnesses like Sheena, swear that both claims are true. And if these recordings are anything, they're at least thought-provoking. So thank you again, Sheena, for the entry. And if your area has any, I'd love to hear some hometown legends from Arctic Circle, if you wouldn't mind calling back in. And that's going to do it for this episode. Monsters Among Us is written and produced by me, Derek Hayes. Additional support is provided by Sarah Carter Hayes and Addie Lloyd. All audio used in this production is done so under the protection of fair use. And if you'd like to keep rolling with the mysteries, join us on social media. And the terrifying score that you hear this evening was provided by Co.ag Music and Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Thank you so much for listening, and until next week. Tonight's top secret entry is another brush with the forest folk, little people, or the Fae. Whatever you call them, Anthony from Massachusetts seems to have first-hand knowledge of their existence.
Hi, my name is Anthony. I'm from Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and this happened, I'd say, end of summer 2019. I have two sons. We went for a hike in the woods, and I was messing with them, actually telling them a story about the Fae folk. And funny enough, we were on a trail. It was just after we had been hit by a tornado, which is weird enough for the area already. And we're in the trail, and there's trees down, and we kept pushing through this hiking trail. It's real close to my house, so I'm not like strange to it, but it was a new one I've never been to. And we just keep pushing. The trees are down, and the thorn bushes, and everything starts getting real thick. And I'm joking with them about stories about the Fae folk, and we keep pushing and pushing. We're 2 hours into the hike, and I reach into my pocket, and I realize my keys are gone, and this is my jacket pocket. There's no way I would have just dropped them and not noticed it. So I tell the kids I lost the keys, and they're freaking out. We're walking back and forth up this trail, up and down this trail, up and down this trail. And mind you, we were cracking jokes about the Fae folk the whole time, like, oh, we're not scared of you. Long story short, it got dark, and we're panicking. We couldn't get to the car. The car was locked. We didn't bring food, water, anything. It wasn't like we were in the woods, but my kids were younger, and out of nowhere, we're walking the trail back to go to the car to just regroup at this point. We'd given up looking. My son finds the keys, eye level, hanging on a tree branch right in front of him, and just instantly started crying. I got the chills instantly. I got the chills retelling you the story, but I don't know much else about it. I definitely don't disrespect the woods or the spirits of the woods anymore when I go in there. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Anthony. You know, it seems like the panic of losing your keys may have got the better of you, and I completely understand. One of my favorite things to do after we return to the truck after a super long hike is to pretend that I lost the keys on the trail somewhere. The panic in everyone's eyes is always priceless. Believe it or not, I'm not all that popular on hiking trips. And finding the keys on a branch honestly isn't all that weird. I've seen other lost items hanging on branches in hopes that the true owner will pass back by and find them hanging there. But I will admit, keys are an odd thing to leave like that. And as easy as it is for me to dismiss some of this, I think it helps keep the story in perspective to mention that this region of the country is infamous for its very own short, stubby, mischievous forest person. You know, Anthony and his boys were hiking through Pukwudgie country.
The Pukwudgie are a tribe of cunning, evil, and mysterious troll-like creatures who are said to have haunted Native American tribes for hundreds of years.
They would steal people's weapons and tools and clothing. Sometimes they would start fires. And then they really became not just a nuisance, but very dangerous. They started kidnapping and killing the native children, and they drove the native people into the forest and then killed them.
Despite their small stature, the Pukwudgie are menacing creatures. According to legend, they possess the ability to shapeshift, to create spontaneous bursts of fire, and to attack their enemies with a wide variety of poisonous weapons.
History has shown that the Pukwudgie doesn't give up. Certainly over time, many people have had minor injuries, but there's also reports of death, either by what seems to be an accident and could easily have been Pukwudgie involvement, or from suicide that the Pukwudgies seem to have influenced. You have a wide range. Whatever the Pukwudgie's in the mood for that day, that's the destruction that he lets loose.
Now that clip courtesy of Animal Planet's Freak Encounters. Now personally, I don't put a ton of stock in the Pukwudgie legend, but man, is it a fun story to share. So thanks again, Anthony, for the great little entry. And thank you for sticking around to the end of the show. Have a good night.